Okay, good afternoon. I guess I'll take... Okay, well, I hope you all had a productive discussion just now, and it looks like it's still ongoing. So it's okay wherever you want to sit. This is quite all right for me, I think. Only one little thing for you guys to consider. Some students, not so much in the form complaint, but a little pleading, saying that we have always been the first group to present. Can we reverse the order somehow? So I wonder if we can do a democratic process on this. Volunteers? The last go first. Well, is that fair to group number 3 and 4? So do you guys agree on that? Last group go first? Show your hand. Show your hand. It's not quite majority. What about group number 6? Is that okay for you guys to go first?
The
Yes?
first group never what? The first group never asked.
No, the first group did ask, which is why the last group is going.
Oh.
No, when,
So
the first
do you
group,
think-
when the first 2 days when they were asked to present, they never got asked. Whether it could be the first
I think, you know, in the next couple of days, you guys can take roll turns, right? So, you know, any group can be the first one to present. So that should be fun. And if so, why don't we just start today? So we'll have group 6 first, and then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fair? Good. So each group has about 10 minutes.
So this is what they call tyranny of the masses, right? Imposing your will on marginalized who can't say no.
For this particular discussion, we focus on the question number 6, discussion from the definition and debate and all other diversity, meaning and possibility of Swaraj. So we're lucky enough to have the Hong Kongese in the group, and also you from Azerbaijan. Right. So we try to think about appropriate the meaning of Swaraj from daily kind of experiences. So maybe we will go from the kind of give you guys a more material sense of how does that mean. And how does that mean for us, for our individuals in the group, and then we will go through everyone because everyone has lots of questions, then have an isolated or single question or single answer for that.
So yeah, maybe I'll just talking about some stories in Hong Kong. Actually, when I come to the word Swaraj. And the difference with the national independence, the first thing that comes into my mind is the Hong Kong one country, two system. Actually, in Hong Kong, Hong Kong people, just a minority, wants to go to independence, but we agreed on the two systems. But maybe in China, they emphasize on the one country, and what means the two system for in Deng Xiaoping's words, is it the one country, the two system is the China's socialist system and the Hong Kong capitalist system. But Hong Kong people emphasize on the freedom of speech and the liberty of this. And I think I want to demonstrate passive resistance in the 1st July event. And actually, there were 511 ordinary people arrested on 2nd of July morning because they are just sitting peacefully outside the Legislative Council. Yeah, because of demonstrating the situation in Hong Kong. Maybe it's the one demonstration of passive resistance. Yeah, and maybe and Hong Kong people are just protecting their lives in the communities and daily life, and maybe it's a kind of us to trying to be Swaraj in our local community lives. Yeah, it's a case in Hong Kong.
When I thinking about this Swaraji from the Okinawan experience, so the people of Okinawa has long been against the huge presence of U.S. military bases, especially last few years in the result of local elections, not for expanding the U.S. military bases. But the result of the election, the voices of the local people has not really been respected by the central Tokyo government. So what I see is like the Okinawa people, the majority of people are not really seeking for the independence, but more like the autonomy as the prefecture or autonomy as Okinawa regions. So the Swaraji can be interpreted in the present context, like the local level or the national level. Maybe the national level can be the areas during the periods during the anti-colonial struggles, but maybe the current East Asian experiences, maybe we can see how the local people seeking the autonomy or self-determination.
I want to speak about my understanding about what Gandhi wanted to just say about Swaraj, want to send people some kind of message. I think Swaraj is it's different than national independence. It's like Swaraj is for the persons, not the full people, not the for majority. Actually, I think what Gandhi wanted is self-control, mental improvement of the person, not the whole majority. And I think Swaraj is totally different than politics, because the way Gandhi teaches, it's like he teaches people for non-violence. But when we talk about politics, we can't imagine politics without non-violence. If it's politics, there have to be violence. And in politics, we can't be honest. We have to lie. But what Gandhi wanted is honest people, and people who made some improvement in their mental and moral life. And okay.
We talked a lot about the differences between Swaraj and national independence, and we think that Swaraj asks for everyone's duty in India, because for Swaraj, national independence is not the goal, but you should have a really better future, and national independence national independence is just its own goal. National independence is seek for independence, but after that, what will India have for? I don't think the nationalists can describe that. another difference between Swaraj and national independence is that national independence ask for need to gain their goal by a whole nation, and a whole nation they are just one, not inhumane. They are it's inhumane. But Swaraj asks for everyone's duty in India, and everyone in India is important and plays a very important part plays a very important part. But
Okay, so one last point to make from my side. I think the idea of Swaraj has to be linked to decolonization at the end of the day. And what decolonization actually means, that's the question that we want to ask. In a Malaysian context, once we regain our independence, does that mean that we are decolonized? Because one of the results of British rule in Malaysia is the ethnic separation. So the Malays, the Chinese, and the Indians, the racial divisions are very clear. But until now, we are still under that specter. Even though we are independent, we still have this kind of ethnic tensions that are going on. So does Swaraj indicate a new politics that's beyond? That's what a local scholar from Malaysia actually presents. So new politics indicating that a politics that transcends ethnic boundaries. And I'm wondering if Swaraj can be one of these ideas.
Following the Dongton and Douglas, one of the things about the Swaraj is more humanity or more spiritual. But we also, I'm curious that will Swaraj eventually will become a nation? Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
So group number 5.
hello.
Okay. So we've got a question is whether we agree with Nandi's discussion of Gandhi transsexual, particularly society and British rule. To put it briefly, yes, we do agree. But I guess in our agreement, we also need to somehow trace back what is this homologue and why would, for example, Gandhi opposed to this homologue between the masculinity and femininity and also violence and non-violence. I'm sure probably most of you have also read Ashish Nandi's Intimate Enemy, and in that article, in that book actually, in that book we can see how there's a certain it was inherent within the Indian tradition how androgyny or androgenicity, what was the noun for that? Okay, I'm sorry, androgyniosity? Okay. Androgyny is a noun, okay, I'm sorry. Okay, how androgyny has a higher importance than, for example, masculinity and femininity. That femininity within masculinity is actually of higher importance, of higher values. And we see this inherent within the Indian tradition. However, with the coming of the Western civilization, there was some sort of the Indian people were forced to somehow reevaluate their values, and I think this was particularly highlighted through Ram Mohan Roy's attempt to sort of put more emphasis on, for example, if you know the story of Rama, and also Ravana, and how Rama was actually more androgynous and more effeminate, and the Ravana was the violent, masculine others, but how the certain emphasis were shifted and how this gets circulated. So somehow the values of masculinity and femininity and also androgyny were forced to be reevaluated and reappropriated to somehow suit it with the colonial conditions at that time. So I think we also need to understand where this then come from, and not simply just agreeing that, oh, okay, it's a good way of, for example, fighting the colonial rule during Gandhi's time, but we also need to understand that this was also rooted within the Indian tradition, and how Gandhi's strategy was actually part of the way of life of the Indian people before the whole binary opposition was somehow implanted within the Indian community. So this is how we understand, and this is why we agreed to Nandi's discussion on Gandhi's strategy.
And just as, I guess, historical addendum to what you just said, we pointed out the fact that this isn't kind of a forced binary limited to the Indian experience. It definitely has global applicability. Whether we're talking about kind of pre-modern or pre-colonial pre-colonial circumstances in other parts of the world, whether we're talking South Pacific or Sub-Saharan Africa or Latin America, that the conditions with respect to gender self-identifications in all of these regions were very fluid or undefined before the moment of colonial encounter. I know for many that's kind of stating an obvious point. But the other point I would make would be why we ought to have Ashish Nandi on our bookshelves with dealing with these contemporary problems. And it has to do with an approach to colonial subjugation, not only in the history of late colonialism or decolonization, but to present-day circumstances. One school of thought, obviously, is that of Mao and Fanon and others, who presumed that in order to drive out the colonizer, you would have to go toe-to-toe in the most militarized sense possible, with whatever means you might have to defeat colonialism, quote unquote. But Nandi's is a much more nuanced or subtle critique in terms of colonization of the self, or more precisely of the mind, and in a way is the most damning critique I've read of the Fanonian approach, which says that you, and Nandi's response is that you can actually reject that approach to driving out the colonizer, which would be that you have to go toe-to-toe with a militarized solution. And that's where this conceptualization of militarized masculinity is so useful to contemporary circumstances.
If I may add a little, I was just not necessarily confused, but how do I say this? So we know that Nandi uses certain method to somehow get into the psychology of colonialism. But he uses, for example, these figures in Indian national history to locate the binary opposition or the shift, and then to also sort of propose the idea of being a non-player, that you don't play into the same game, you know, you don't, what do you call it? You don't play into the same game that has been laid out by the so-called enemy. But my question would be like, how do we appropriate, or how do we make sense of this whole non-player concept into our contemporary situation? I mean, I understand it when I read Nandi, oh, okay, so this is, that there was an alternative that has already been given if we look at the past history. But then again, how do we actually mobilize or utilize this alternative concept in our contemporary situation when we look at the global structure that has already been set up these days?
In response to the second question, how do you think about sexuality and gender in terms of post-colonial national psychology? It's a huge question. I can't summarize it in the next 3 minutes, but I tried to think of some international examples of figures who sort of challenged the usual dichotomy of male and female, who have got attention recently. And I know in Australia there is a speechwriter for the top military general called Kate McGregor, who's just come out as a woman, and it was a big story in Australia. Chelsea Manning as well in the States. Also, I wanted to say one more thing. I think there's a lot of sort of area between asexual and transsexual, and I don't know if Nandi captures that in his writings on Gandhi, because at times Gandhi was very asexual and didn't want to have anything to do with any gender at all, and in other times he sort of crossed gender boundaries. So I think people who do queer studies would know a lot more about that than me. But anyway. Are we done now?
We thought we had a particularly hard one. Although listening to the King Swaraj one, I realised that we had similar challenges. Our question was, what do we think about Gandhi's definition of civilization as good conduct and morality? Does the emphasis on the spiritual or soul power make sense to you in thinking about such terms as overcoming modernity or de-imperialisation? And when we started to talk about this, we'd just come off the bat of Nandi's kind of distinction between Gandhi's use of civilization and Tagore's use of ideas of nationalism or nation states, whether critical or not. So we have this problem of civilization actually exceeding concepts of the nation state, and that's really difficult if you're trying to imagine that practically as a kind of society. And we were trying to approach it practically. So, does this definition of civilization as good conduct and morality help us envisage a different form of society? And we came up with a few ideas.
So to answer this question, actually my own point is, because we talk about is it this idea of civilization where we will make it focus on practical, and what I'm thinking is if we go back to that time, there is a group of nationalist elite in India, and there is Gandhi's project. So nationalist agenda and civilization agenda. So compared to these two agendas in that time in India, I think Gandhi's agenda is more practical than nationalist agenda. And this is, I think what we want to say is to emphasize some kind of effort to the, like maybe you don't need to do too much, don't do too much, don't make too much effort. And so I think for civilization, the idea of civilization is not so difficult. So it's also, for me, it's not a problem of overcoming modernity, because at that time colonial power only occupied the city place and some elite in India. So it is just not welcoming modernity, like don't welcome, like don't try too hard to welcome modernity. And so there's also no this kind of problem like de-imperialization or what. Like I think maybe we can take his idea of non-violence as not so active or passive, like idea of passive seriously. So it is a non-player also his idea. Like so my feeling is his civilization idea of civilization is not so romantic and not so unpractical, and no need too much effort, because no lawyer are in a rural place, no doctor, no railway. Most of the places that without modernity, or they don't have the idea of rule of law. So that's it.
I prefer to say he is opposing civilization. Instead, what I'm thinking about his claim about the fundamental assumption about the structure of civilization, at the same time the meaning of nation brought by English West. So he claimed about the fundamental assumption about the structure of civilization. So on the basis of the civilization brought by West, because he kept claiming about civilization and also machinery things and railway, those kind of things, and also violence. He claimed about the fundamental assumption of violence also because of the essence of the brave, because that's why they take violence instead of non-violence. It's also on the basis of different kinds of fundamental assumptions. So he keep claim about the fundamental assumption, so he can analyze his different alternative structure of nation. So it's very much persuasive to me. I mean, it's not abstract or idea theory to build a new nation, but if we change or change our point of view about the fundamental assumption, it can be, and it really works. Yeah, that's my opinion.
I would like to add one point, is that although Gandhi's idea about civilization or his way to solve the problem at this time failed, his ideas of his thinking was very valuable, and as we mentioned just now, to think about the fundamental assumption or the value we seek to organize a new social structure, that is very inspiring, and which reminds me of Han Xie's idea about aesthetic revolution is previous than social revolution, because only we changed our idea and our aesthetics of our aesthetics, and then the structure, the whole structure can change. Otherwise, only social revolution happened, and we just changed our position in the same structure. So that's what I want to add.
And I want to answer the second question, that talking about the spiritual or soul power as a way of overcoming modernity, with Takeuchi Yoshimi's understanding of Ruxun's Huixing, or return to heart, or reverse to heart. Takeuchi Yoshimi used Ruxun to describe a way of a position against modernity, like we always, when we facing the foreign forces, or when we face the other, we can always feel we might feel the sense of tension, or the sense of struggle, or resistance, and instead of taking whatever we are given, and to form in this sense, we form
to negate our own self, but negate too the stronger other, and to in between to form a new subjectivity with the sense of resistance and the sense of self-negation, and to find a way of overcoming the modernity, and also looking backward and looking backward and looking inward to I think to deactivate the linear historical time. And I think that I use Takeuchi Shimizu's understanding of Lu Xun in relate to this question.
Yesterday, I read some material of Tagore, and I just remember Tagore has, this think Indian society should be like the living organism, and Western goods should be served as its food. But today I think now when I look at this picture, so I want to find some words to describe the picture. I will say self-sufficient and self-reliance, and even perhaps Gandhi has think now self-sacrifice is necessary for people to develop or to express our ideas. So is that possible that the word of self is very important for us to understand the theory of Gandhi? So I just think, just like Lu Xun, Gandhi had, he just tried to change himself, but not others. He just wants to criticize his behavior, but not other persons. So she just wants to try more emphasis on inner world, but not the outer ones. So as to our question, I think if we put more emphasis on the spiritual or soul power, that does make sense to me in thinking about such terms as overcoming modernity. Yes, that's all. So, okay, so.
Once upon a time in Melbourne, a friend from Bangladesh asked me, Tilly, are you really a Muslim? And to me, this question was really intriguing because I'm wearing hijab, and she's also wearing hijab. So I asked her, why did you ask? Well, your name doesn't sound Muslim at all. Pratibirganja is a Hindu name. So this is quite interesting because growing up in a society with different religions and also ethnic groups, different languages, somehow what struck me is that this multiculturalism, which I take for granted in Indonesia, can actually be a problem in other countries. So that is the entry point to our discussion. Basically, our group agreed on the idea that Gandhi was the one who promoted multiculturalism. But there is one condition, that multiculturalism would exist without domination. And it is going to elaborate what we mean by multicultural without domination.
Just borrow this word from Guha. He talks about, I can't remember his book name, but his book name is something without hegemony, without dominance, without domination. So I find that what I interpret from
Hindu Swaraj text that written by Gandhi is he proposes a kind of multiculturalism, but a mutualism without dominance, because we think that it will sort of explain that why Hindu and Muslims have to join in hands in anti-colonial resistance. And after the British were kicked out, the leftover British can still stay in this multicultural scheme of India, but they can stay because they don't have that structure of domination, which is colonialism. So I think in this way, in the text, Gandhi is proposing this multiculturalism without dominance.
My brother Hussain mentioned something about the idea that differences is one thing, but conflict over differences is another thing. So to be able for multiculturalism without domination to exist, there is another condition that has to be there, which we call, in this case, national unity, and Hussain is going to explain that.
Okay, let me tell my biographical example. Coming from Bangladesh, all you know. So I have multiple identity actually. I am a Muslim, I am a Bengali, I have a national identity, and while I'm saying I'm a Bengali, I inherit at least 3 civilizational background: Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism. So these are all part of my identity and culture. And when I say I'm a Muslim, so there can be some discrepancies. Somebody can say it is not compatible, this and that thing. So I would like to go back to the simple question is, it is not the problem of difference, cultures, multiple things that a person has. It is a problem of the politics of identity. So while the Indian people, those who were fighting, and they were trying to arrive at an identity that under one identity we should gather and unite, and that is the question of then we need to privilege one identity. And that identity should mark as an overriding, fundamental identity that can unite all. So here is a problem of privileging one identity. You have to pick up one, and you have to substantiate it in a way that it holds something substantive, and it is not just identity that includes all, it is also an identity that also differentiates you from other things. So that's why I said actually it is the problem of not the difference, but the problem of conflict. And I would like to refer Gandhi, the way he deals the question of the Hindu-Muslim problem regarding one particular issue as in cow slaughtering. So it's again I'm telling my personal story. He was trying to pursue one line which is very important. He was saying that, okay, I do like cows, I want to protect, this is very important, not just because of the religious reasons, it's also because of the economic issues, for the peasants and these things. But I cannot do it by imposing my personal religious value, because it is contradictory to other person's religious value. So how to solve this problem? Solving the problem is you should start a consensus building. You should respect that he does have the same and equal right to exercise his religion, and he has the choice. So here you have different views. So you can take it as a conflicting issues, or you can take it as a way to make consensus. So Gandhi's way is really perfectly, fundamentally the solution that we can really think of it. When we come such kind of problem, there is only one way to make dialogue, building consensus and living in such kind of communal harmony. In Dhaka, we have one restaurant. It's a very, very popular restaurant. Muslim Bengalis, they love to eat beef a lot. But this restaurant, for the last 70 years, they are branding one thing that you will see if you go to Star Restaurant. Maybe some of my Bengali friends have visited Dhaka. No beef. This is what they do. And this is a very delicious restaurant, we all love to go there, but they don't sell anything beef, because we live in such a community, in a country that if you cook beef, that half of your community will not even think of coming to this restaurant as well. So nobody was enforcing that, but he, the person who started this restaurant, he just did it out of his this kind of thinking and regard and respect. So that is one thing that maybe he was inspired by Gandhi. I don't know. Who else?
Yeah, just to give a particular example of national unity in Indonesian context, for example. Coming from a country with some 100 different languages and also ethnic groups, there is what we call, we do have some symbols that unite us. So Anita is wearing batik. Anita, could you just, this batik cloth is actually our symbol of national unity, and also the Bahasa Indonesia as the language that unites us. Now, there is also another condition that we think should exist to be able for national unity to be sustained, and that is mutual respect, and Tariq is going to explain that.
Okay. I mean, being Muslim is not that you will eat the beef and you will be Muslim. And until unless you are not eating beef, you are not Muslim. And I mean, to see the slaughter of the cow, it doesn't mean that your Hindu sheep is just going far away. So it is actually the way of perspective, how you can see that. I mean, there is a glorious historical, history in India to the Hindu-Muslim community. They have lived with peace for a long, long time. In between, maybe there is some sort of accident, as Gandhi said, that maybe there are two brothers, they may have some quarrel, some debate in some issues, they may have fight inside of their family, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you will ask some other people to, have the judgment to your, very own family, brotherly quarrel. So it is the same thing goes with India, right? So, so the thing is, actually, there are many identities, like the people of West Bengal, they say they are Bengali, they are from Kolkata, and then they go, when go out of the country, they say they are, Indian. And when they go beyond the continental boundary, they say that they are Asian. So the thing is, we may have a very different identity, but we can go beyond the identity of religion by saying that, like, my national identity would be more preferable and very generous to, which will merge all of the problem with identity. We may say that I'm Indian, that's all. Well, I'm Muslim, I'm Hindu, so what? I am Indian overall. So in the case of national issues, national policy, national identity, so we can be united under the umbrella of, nationalism. So in a way, it is really possible to be, to live peacefully with Hindu and Muslim, and multiculturalism, yes.
So we got the second question. Basically, there are two parts of the question. First, to reflect on Gandhi's critique of modern civilization, an example of the railway, and on the modern technology, particularly the internet that we're interested in. So the way we're going to try to answer it is try to reflect on the idea of modern civilization, and then we have a certain question or our own critique, which Mikey is going to talk about on contemporary context on global movement. And then we're going to close with a question that we're interested in relation to Ashish's statement in regards to them. We will talk about it later. So it's going to be pretty short. So our reflection on modern civilization, I think it's important to remember what Gandhi is against is perhaps is on industrial revolution, on the idea of movement that is very fast, that becomes the trigger and the engine of the machinery, that it moves fast, that it produces more and more things. And that's what he is against because he doesn't want, or he tries to say that you shouldn't move faster than your natural body can allow you, right? So that's why, for example, he's against the idea of the railway, because then you're moving places that you shouldn't be able to go as fast for him. But we also would like to address the problem of certain contradictions that we're concerned about, in which he is focused on self-control, but why isn't he like use it to be able to balance things out? Because it seems like he focuses a lot on external evils, like that the railways will bring like bacteria, sickness, illness, whatever, or cinema would lead you to gambling. Why isn't there a certain balance or a middle ground of it? Like you can control yourself, or cinema is okay if you do ABC, or railway is okay if you treat transportation as ABC. So it's an interesting area where his idea of self-control is negating the external evils right away with no middle ground at all for us. And then also the problem of leaps in logic that we are concerned about. Why is it that cinema would lead you directly to addiction? I know it's a rhetorical move so that people don't do it, but you know, as an idea, how would that work if we really imply it? Or the idea that railway would be problematic because everyone would just go out of their villages and not taking care of their own space. And we're moving on to the...
With regard to the question of technology and whether Gandhi's critiques about the technology as a marker of civilization, modernity, is still applicable today, yes and no. Yes, because it does echo to those kind of silly, conservative, right-wing moral panics about what the media does to children. Like television would like scramble their minds, MTV would like teach them about sex. The internet would be for pornography. It is, but you know that's another story. So it echoes through all of these, right-wing conservative critiques. But at the same time, you can also kind of throw different media theories at Gandhi and kind of see if they bounce off. Marshall McLuhan's the medium is the message, for example, or the idea of having a media environment and cyborg theory and android theory and all of these things where we cannot really separate our sense of self from our use of technology, especially in this modern global age. And also one question kind of lingers is that so Gandhi was kind of against railways and all of these technologies, but he was lenient toward books. So he was okay with books, which is a form of medium. So would he be like okay with Twitter, for example, or would he be like a blogger? And then there's also a sense of irony in that technology both brings people together and brings them apart. That we know it's easier to talk with other people from halfway around the globe, but we don't actually get to talk with our physical neighbors. So I think Gandhi would have been against that, and he would have been know your physical neighbors first before you talk with other people from across the planet.
So the idea about the book is actually in chapter 20 in his Swaraj, that you don't have to read. But anyway, the last statement of the editor, which he said that, what if your ideas travel through print
medium. How if it is printed, and he said that's the poison that is necessary to kill the other poison. Well, basically necessary evil. And of course, with what Ashi said, he may be a blogger with the way that he delivers contemporary ideas in his time, if you want to compare it with now. But would he be comfortable with the poison that we have now, that is the internet? Or maybe he would just, Shim said, maybe he would just do fasting and kill himself in 40 days because the internet is too crazy for him. That's our closing question. So thank you.
We want to discuss how we can apply Gandhi's theory of passive resistance to think about social movement of late, and we will bring some different contexts to discuss it. And what I'm trying to bring is that several months ago there an anti-nuclear power movement in Taiwan, and the ex-chairman of DPP called Lin Yixiong, he went on fast, and I'm trying to say that is in Taiwan's in this context, because of Lin Yixiong went on fast and kind of justifies the other kind of protests, and the recent anti-nuclear power movement became more aggressive, and they raised their level of protest. So I'm trying to say that in Taiwan's in this context, passive resistance is not so contradict to another kind of resistance or movement. It's somehow kind of combine or cooperate with each other in its practice. And that also comes to, for me, it comes two questions. First is that in this kind of resistance, Lin Yixiong come into a noble position and consider a noble person, and because he is so respected like Gandhi. And what I'm trying to argue is that is this kind of pure soul can link to certain politics. How to say? Is this kind of soul justify certain policy or politics, and is this kind of soul negotiable? Can negotiate with each other's position or others policy? Yeah. And another question is that because people were saying Lin Yixiong didn't deserve to stop, and we want to save his life, and so people being mobilized to this movement and be kind of purified by his soul. But for many people who fighting, I think many people is consider deserve suffering. And for those people whose soul is already being considered ugly or disgusting or even evil, how could these people use their, in Gandhi's words, soul force? And if the definition of passive resistance is a method of securing rights by personal suffering, how could this method possible for those people who are already suffering or already starved or already being put into jail? So how kind of suffer could these people do to make it possible for politics?
I think we need
I would like to share a case in Korea. There was a huge protest in 2008 named the Candle Light Riot in Korea. Firstly, it started for issue of importing it from America by free trade agreement. People concerned about its medical disease, but many socialist issues bring up related to bad effects of FTA agreement, FTA with the US. So people took place the central speaker in Seoul every night, and it continued over 2 months. And over 100,000 people gathered every night at the time. And I want to take a point on this related to Gandhi's role. And there is no leader and leading organization in this protest. It is the biggest difference between this protest and previous other protests in Korea. So it is by internet and to be able to gather such many people at the same time. I think you can talk about a lot of similarities between this case and other Occupy movement after 2000 activate of the internet or social media. Ellen could tell another case in Indonesia.
So, hello all. Talking about passive resistance, in my understanding, Gandhi has this idea of having a passive resistance in relation to modernity. Yes. Now I'm trying to put it into the context of Indonesia, which I'm not sure that we have any period that can be clearly stated as the modern period. Since I think Indonesia got all this about modernity and globalization at almost the same time. This may or may not be similar cases with other Asian countries. So I don't know, you can tell me about this. Well, talking about the context of Indonesia, having a social movement using social media is almost become a trend right now. There are many instant cases where people can gather and post their political statement using social media accounts such as Twitter, Facebook, and even online petition websites such as change.org. Yeah. It made me wonder if this idea of Gandhian passive resistance can be applied into the social movement. You said social movement that use social media as their media. From our discussion, passive resistance being a form of protest is in a way that will result in some sort of moral obligation or maybe some sort of social pressure to the aggressor to acknowledge demands from people who do this passive resistance. In regards to this, I wonder what is the position of mass media with this passive resistance concept, since I don't know how people going to pressure, having this social pressure if there is no audience at all. So those are questions that arise when I look back at Indonesian context. There is also the protest done by Greenpeace. I think that Greenpeace has silent and innovative way of stating their political statement towards unjust things that could be the example of passive resistance. Such as the example is when they are protesting against Russian oil it's Russian oil. There were about 30 Greenpeace activists that is being caught by the authority and sent to jail. You may know this case, maybe not. However, I think that Gandhian passive resistance is about an individual making their own political statement. And to not involve or using violence and have this self-sacrificing mentality. While in Greenpeace, I think it was more of being mobilized by the NGO. So I see that this activist is not an individual expressing their political statement, but they are being representative of this NGO. So those are questions that I'm struggling with, this idea of passive resistance. So yeah, maybe you guys can, I don't know, help me answering this question. Yeah, so maybe want to ask? Was there something?
Okay, these are the concluding remarks. Actually, let me just think of the Gandhian ideas. How do they operate? I mean, I find there are two levels of this operative. So first, it works on the level of the individual. The individual is recognized by the authority against whom the individual or the individual soul or the collective is being engaged in a fight or some kind of resistance. And second, this form of resistance definitely requires some kind of audience. If there is no audience, the entire mode will be in vain. So without any kind of audience, there couldn't be any kind of passive resistance. I think this question is quite relevant. I don't have time, so I would have told a few words. Anyway, so this debate of having a kind of audience is quite relevant in India's context. I mean, after 2000, specifically when the movement against land eviction has been started, and it is now the biggest social movement in India, raised by mostly the indigenous communities, and it is often taking kind of violent forms. So there is a constant, continuous critique from the civil society against the violent nature of this movement. So eventually, there is another point. I mean, these movements are taking this kind of violent form because there is no form exists. You just can't ask people to starve who are already starving. So in that way, and also these communities were not recognized politically or culturally by the state for a long time. So state is not their audience. So how could you even address your problem through the mode of passive resistance when you don't have any audience existing over there? And also, I think this is the point. These are the points where the relevancy of Gandhism somehow ceased to exist. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We have about, it's a little past, we have about 20 minutes actually, exactly to conclude. And I just want to make two quick little remarks. Combining yesterday and today's presentations, I am kind of hoping that, and I think that this is evident from all the presentations you made, that you did get a sort of a sense of the complexity of the process of approaching some of these Asian intellectuals like these. Whether the sorts of problems that Gandhi and Tagore posed before us, conceptually and politically, are problems that can be extended to other people like Mao, whom we will be talking about tomorrow, or whether they are unique to these particular individuals is, I suppose, a problem that will unfold as the summer school goes on. And when you're looking at modern Asian thought, the kind of presence of particularly these two modern Asian thinkers within the larger paradigm, what meaning they will throw upon a larger canvas, which is what I think Wanshi wants to open up with the Modern Asian Thought Project, is I think something that we will be discussing as we go. I just wanted to make a couple of quick comments. One is that politically, Gandhi particularly, as a practitioner of the political and as a producer of exemplary political action, would have been, I suppose, very happy to see the diversity of uses to which the methodologies that he invented have been put. You know, so passive resistance, if it is being used by Greenpeace, or it was used by, you know, the anti-Vietnam movements in Washington, would have pleased him perhaps, but never ever underestimate the innate contradictoriness of the man, okay? Never ever underestimate the extraordinary difficulty with which Gandhi constantly presents us with choices and contradictory positions and takes quixotic decisions, okay? These are decisions he takes not only conceptually, but politically as well. So, I mean, one really famous occasion when he did this, we went to the Chauri Chaura incident. So basically what happens is that Gandhi actually inaugurates the movement, the passive resistance movement, and an incident occurs in a small town called Chauri Chaura when a police station is attacked by a mob and some violence happens, and Gandhi, it's actually within the large scale of things, it's a very tiny incident. But Gandhi uses that incident to call off the agitation. He simply apologizes to the British and says, we're pulling back. Which simply did not make sense as a political movement. He did not say that this is one of those things that happens, you know, that, you know, on the broad scale of things. On other occasions, he will say it's one of those things. You know, so there is a difficulty there, and I think there has been some effort within, again, the modern Asian thought context to analyze such seeming contradictions, okay? In India, increasingly, it is getting self-evident that ideology and ideological differences between political oppositions do not account for the politics of the situation. And indeed, if you look at, I mean, taking India right now, the Bharatiya Janata Party, which happens to be ancestrally, I suppose, the party, or when its forebears, of the man who actually assassinated Gandhi. And Nandi's essay is quite important on that particular front. Nathuram Godse was actually part of the Hindu Parivar, which is today in political power. If you look at that particular political formation and the problems that they had with the Congress over the last decade, which brought the Parliament of India to a complete halt and made it impossible for the Congress to pass almost any major resolution, and said how many of those problems are actually due to fundamental ideological differences. You'll find that there aren't too many. In fact, I think they talked about 3. I think Article 370, Uniform Civil Code, and the Ayodhya, the Ram Temple at Ayodhya. Beyond that, there's almost no ideological difference, and there's a startling continuity politically between what they're doing and what their predecessors did. Which leads you to ask, what is the contradiction? Where is the problem? Why are these people ready to kill each other over issues that do not make sense to people not within that? Why do people behave in this way? Ranajit Guha has done some work on this. In fact, elementary aspects of peasant insurgency, one of the classic subaltern studies texts, mentioned dominance without hegemony. Guha talks about the problems that peasant insurrections and peasant rebellions have in trying to define anything remotely resembling enlightened self-interest on the part of the peasantry. Why they behave in the way they do does not or is not easily accountable by their actions. You know, so you have difficulties there, which I think are part of the methodology. Particularly, I think subaltern studies in India was one such, and I think they were very influential amongst others. And of course, really the incredibly towering figure of Ashish Nandi in this area. I mean, Nandi's incredible work in making this kind of thinking available to you is important. I mean, you know, when he begins the essay that you're looking at, it says that any assassination, political assassination, is a collusion between victim and assassin. You know, they're both participating in the theatre of it. I think it's an extraordinary thing to say, but it leads you to an understanding of the kind of methodologies that we might need to forge together to understand such politics. And I would be very, very interested. By the way, I wanted to welcome Stephen Chan here. Stephen will be with you over the next 20 days. Stephen is coming from the battlefields of Hong Kong. And we were talking about Hong Kong earlier in the afternoon as well. that events of that kind and what, the Gandhian position may have been on those, and elsewhere in Asia, I'd be very, very interested and keen to understand how you would take it from there. Just one very quick last point on print and on what Gandhi would have had to say on the internet. Obviously, I don't know. He could have easily said the internet is the most alienating device we have come across because it completely kills the community. Or he might have said the internet is the greatest thing that ever happened because it builds community. Or he might have said the internet is a poison that has to be tolerated because it helps you to do something. There's no telling what he would have said. Okay, this is really important to note. You cannot quote Gandhi to prove your point because he will say something else the next time that disproves your point. Okay, it's really, really crucial to know that. So I can't say what he would have said. I think that the politics of it, however, would work in a certain sort of way. He would try and figure out what is going on within that particular structure and what its results are. And that, I think, is, paying attention to that form of detail, I think, is a very important phenomenon within the politics of the event itself. What did it lead to? As I was saying earlier, in the context of the Hong Kong, we're talking about that television thing, and whether actually the process, the purpose of political agitation is to learn how to agitate. Never mind the consequences, because you're actually learning how to behave in a certain sort of way, and the state is learning how to behave in a certain sort of way, rather than looking at what results it's had, for example, is one possible way of thinking about it. One very last point about the Muslim-Hindu thing. I remember K.A. Abbas, who is a very, very important sort of thinker, writer, journalist, filmmaker, and so on, saying that when the news of Gandhi's assassination came, his first thought was, thank God it wasn't a Muslim. And there was, in a sense, that aspect of the problem, and Gandhi, of course, goes into it, that the very people who killed Gandhi was actually that enlightened, liberal, intellectual class, in a sense, because, in a sense, in a curious way, the Tagorean anxiety about Gandhian populism sort of comes true by the fact that the people who actually were responsible for the assassination, extremists as they might have been, nevertheless do represent that kind of intelligentsia who could not handle him. Okay, so, besides.
Well, I don't really have way too much to add, but I want to thank the students for the wonderful presentations, and that simply showed me that you guys have a lot more to say than I expected it. But I do want to, point out two things. One is that the whole thing about Gandhi, and a lot of you touched on that, is that I think there's a symbolic element to it. In other words, you can't take his word as, as she was saying, on a literal level. There is that symbolic nature, performance, theatricality that needs to be accounted for. So in that sense, even the simple as spinning the wheel, whose significance does not lie in spinning the wheel itself, but in its contextual, relevance. And in that sense, it brings me to my second point, which is how do we, as inter-Asian students or scholars, enter a dialogue with some historical precursors? In other words, how is it possible to talk to Gandhi, in this 80-year span? It's not quite possible, right, in a sense. And as Ashish was pointing out, you can't really hold him to his words. But what is interesting as an thought experiment is to think about two things. One is that if we're coming in as a historian, we wanted to put his words in his own context, right? So what he means by civilization has to be understood within his own context. And we can't jump back to say, it's relevant or it's not precisely because of our presentist sort of perspective. The other thing to know, which is also historical, is to understand all this discussion, including the nation and ethnicity and modernity, are historical inventions, right? So India was one, when, for whom, at what point, and how that oneness is articulated. right? So the kind of nationalist sentiments we might have today might as well be a modern invention rather than some kind of ancient historical legacy that we all inherited for whatever reasons. So I think it's important to, in other words, to both be attentive to its historical roots, the kind of problems they have surrounding their debates, but also to be very attentive to its historicity, with which we tend to just grab and say, this is what we think Gandhi was trying to say, and this is how we agree or disagree with it. So I think with those two notes, I hope that's helpful as complication up to what we said. And we might still have 7 minutes.
Yeah, 7 minutes, 7 to 10 minutes for questions, general comments.
It's also probably interesting to ask us. This is kind of my own reading of the text, and also with we actually did this together, a group of students for 1 semester, right, including these 2 texts. And one thing strikes me, it's already pointed out, self-rule, home rule is very, very, very strong demand on the self, literally the self, right? And there is whatever suffering, and everyone take notes of it. But I still don't know, with sort of the study on Gandhi, how do they trace this? My own imagination is it has something to do with Buddhism. Right? There's a sort of strong demand, you have to practice and all that in order for things to work. Right? Very, very strong, internal, inner self. Right? Or is this Christian? I have no idea. So this, I think the very, very basis seem to be, wherever he puts the blame, is our problem rather than theirs. We have to look back into the problem of itself. I mean, that's what seems to be at heart of his position or whatever. And then the following point, the connected point, I think sort of Ashish Nandi pulled out from both Gandhi and Tagore. I think one simple position is actually categorically challenge the very notion of the modern, right? Including so-called modernity. In other words, I don't think Gandhi is stupid. He was critiqued like a railway and all that, right? But he uses railway for his own movement. So if we read in contemporary terms, it is a critique and challenge of the hegemony of the modern, right? And try to open up all these resources to what? So this is, I think, the issues come back to Tagore, and from Nandi, then you get, it is this category of the civilization. So in terms of India, right, Indian civilization is much, much more longer and larger category than the Indian nation. Whereas modern India is a very small piece of the Indian civilization. Or you can scratch categorically. So you can open for different historical periods. Not only for him, it seemed to be all different moments coexist in the contemporary moment, right? Including the modern, in the contemporary Indian civilization, whether you like it or not. I think there seems to be the sort of methodological move to call into the question of the modern, as if this is the only way, or including so-called alternative modernity, sort of coexist with everything else. At least that seems to be, I don't know how this is my own take on reading this text. And I'm bringing out, just to see whether it will be useful angle.
Just one slight comment on one particular part of your very complicated question. The influences, I mean, Buddhism could have been one. I don't know enough about Gandhi to know how much of it was there, but the most overt influence is, there's 2 of them. Actually, one is Vaishnavite a kind of Vaishnavite philosophy tradition within India, which is a sect of Hinduism, which is attached to the tradition of the saint poets, and a particular sort of tradition of a kind of proletarian cultures that go back into, well, roughly speaking, from the 10th to the 17th, 18th centuries, and coming into even the 19th, which often constitute the origins of regional languages and regional cultures. So Gandhi does present himself as one such, and there is, the whole thing about Vaishnava Janato, Tene Kahiye Peeda Parai Jane Re, that particular thing which is constantly associated with Gandhi, with the same quote by Narsi Mehta, and his use of the Gujarati language as a particular kind of language, easily communicatable, no influence, or as little as possible, of the classical Sanskrit, for example. That's one aspect. The second aspect is Christianity. There's very definitely a certain idea of Christianity and a particular sort of structure of exemplary behavior, where you perform a certain kind of public act. So those influences are definitely on him. That's kind of well known.
More questions? Yes, please.
Some say it's some stupid question, but Gandhi's Swaraj and Swadeshi is not cultural studies. Sorry. My question is that if it is possible to interpret Gandhi's anti-modernization or anti-civilizational position as anti-capitalism. In other words, I mean that in the period of Gandhi lives, the East Indian Company, established and managed by the English, ruined the regional economy of India. So I think that Gandhi must have witnessed the ruinous effects of capitalism, though he did not refer to any word of capitalism. So I think it is maybe possible to interpret like that. So I want to hear your comment and.
Yes, that's a good question, and it's an important question. Actually, what we do have in India is a form of Gandhian capitalism, right? It's an important tradition of capitalism. It's associated with trader capital and particular communities, the Marwadis, for example, who are in themselves very Gandhian. They will, for example, donate money for good causes. They will not perform certain kinds of acts of corruption and so forth. But these are very often business communities with whom Gandhi was always very friendly. His anti-capitalism was almost entirely directed towards industrial capital. Yeah? And most particularly industrial capital coming from England. So the mills and the textiles and machine-made objects is what he directed his anger towards primarily. So this other form of a kind of a low-end trading economy was something that he was generally seen as close to, and as I was saying earlier, he is often, people draw attention to the fact, historians, that the caste, that Banya caste that Gandhi actually comes from are these financiers, a particular sort of a trading sector. There was a certain sort of, you might say, a certain element of the canny businessman in Gandhi, in that way.
And you mean that Gandhi can accept the Indian capital, not just industrial capital?
Industrial capital across the board, I think, would be the bad thing for him. That would be the problem.
Thank you very much.
Should we just go for one more question, because I think it's time. Would that be fine? One last burning question, comments? Over.
I don't know. Actually, one thing really disturbs me about thinking non-violence. So how do we actually want to define violence? And we have the problem of resistance. Say, for example, if a people, a community is being occupied and conquered, and if they try to resist at some point, And the resistance is also now is being categorized as terrorism, violence, these and that things. So there is a subtle danger of criminalizing a self-protecting, preserving, resisting political force. So I should rather say, how it's a really very difficult challenge. So on the one hand, we are actually glossing everything, maybe under the name of violence and non-violence. So it's a very binary category, and it really puts us into a very difficult problem in terms of accounting for the resistance and that kind of coercive manners. I should not say violence, that's why I'm saying this force and coercion. How would you actually address this issue?
At this stage of the evening, I will have to take that as a comment. The concept is actually far more controversial as it has grown in the 20th century than its seemingly easily accessible, liberalism, non-violence would normally permit.
I would just quickly say in response to that question, non-violence becomes fashionable in a sense, right? Because it conforms with our standard of civility nowadays. So when you go and fight, there's more of an urge to be non-violent than being militant. But that's a question about strategy, how much you want to play and how much of suffering you want to show through media and whatnot, to show the violence of the other, through your non-violence. So it's not a direct answer to your question, but I thought I would, give you another spin on that. So I guess we'll run out of time. I want to thank all of you for being here this long afternoon. And before we break, thank you. Hee-Hong's got an announcement to make, right? Hee-Hong. So thank you very much.
So just a reminder that there will be 2 buses taking you back to the dormitory from here. The first bus leaves at 6:30. But if you want to head around the area, the second bus will leave at 9 o'clock sharp. So don't be late, or you have to take taxi or whatever by yourself. And it is a little bit hard to call taxi because this is Friday night.